Earlier this week, the sprint races were announced for the 2023 Formula One season. The FIA have determined that there will be 6 of these companion races run throughout the year. While for many fans this is quite exciting, there is an argument to be made that it's not the great news that we should be expecting. It's no secret that Formula One has been expanding the number of tracks it runs per year. Whether it be adding tracks in new countries or creating sprint races at existing venues, it's all starting to add up, and not in a good way. In 2019, just 4 years ago, Formula One held 21 races. In 2023, they will be hosting 30. And sure, 6 of those are sprint races, but at the end of the day, it's still Formula One cars that are racing around for points. With 24 main rounds, the year 2023 is by far the most that has ever been held in a season. Many fans will be happy with this, as more racing is always a good thing, but I'd like to play devil's advocate and say that there are indeed too many races on the calendar.
I'm not an engineer, so I don't know quite how it works.
Drivers, mechanics, staff, and other personnel are already sacrificing a lot. Being on the road for weeks on end is a good way to get burned out, and 24 race weekends is already a lot of time. Teams work tirelessly on those weekends, making sure the car is ready for race day. During the Wednesday before the race, to the Sunday night after the race, each day is a minimum 12-hour workday. That's 60 hours that goes into one race weekend. In a quote by an ex-Mercedes strategist, "You're very tired all the time, and it's not a good tired. It's not tired from thinking hard about an interesting problem. It's tired from pumping in the same mind-numbing tasks week after week. Tired from fighting jet lag even though you haven't gone anywhere." Albeit, he did say earlier on that it was worth it, but you have to think that every member on the team is feeling this kind of fatigue. And doing this for weeks on end with such an unusual work schedule must be taxing not only mentally, but physically and emotionally as well. And let's say the mechanics get too fatigued and forget to check something on the car. That is a dangerous situation for a driver to be in that compromised car. This is of course an example, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the mechanics, they're very talented, but the possibility does exist with the situation that they're being placed in.
He's got a mental age of 10 in the first place.
Let's talk about the scheduling. It's not great. For example, having Baku and Miami in back-to-back weeks is a nightmare. Qatar is also separated from the rest of the Middle Eastern races, being placed at the back end of the schedule, while the other races are at the front end. You also have Austin and Las Vegas, the 2 United States Grand Prix, separated by 2 Grand Prix and a month apart. And the biggest mystery is Las Vegas and Abu Dhabi being on a doubleheader and are literally a whole hemisphere apart. The FIA says it's slowly trying to regionalize the schedule, like all the Asian and Oceanic races in one part of the schedule, all the European races, etc, etc. And I understand there may be some conflicts with contracting, weather in different areas, politics, and that sort of thing, but it's a bit demotivating to see a schedule like this. It's almost as if the FIA put all the countries into a bowl and picked them out at random almost. And on top of the 24 we already have, it's incredible that we don't have races in places like India, Malaysia, South Africa, Turkey and Portugal, whichever doesn't get chosen, and freaking Germany. We don't have a race in Germany. Think of all the history that exists between Germany and Formula One, and it's not even on the calendar for next year. That's insane to me. Now the FIA is chasing money with the slew of new Middle Eastern and American tracks, and quite frankly, I don't agree with that. Miami and Qatar don't really need to be on the schedule, and while we haven't raced at Las Vegas, just looking at the track design makes me want to fall asleep. It literally looks like an upside down pig. And I will say, I do think Saudi Arabia, the track is actually pretty good, one of my favorites to be honest. But considering there was a missile strike just 9 miles from the circuit this year, yeah, probably not the best idea. However, me not agreeing with the FIA means nothing, and this trend will likely carry on for the foreseeable future.
And all I can say to that is bullshit.
The more pressing issue that I find not many people are focusing on relies on the championship battle, and the points accumulated throughout the season. Now, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent, so bear with me for a second. So, in Formula 1, points are assigned to the top 10 drivers, with the top driver getting 25 points, all the way down to 10th place, getting a single point. As the seasons become longer, this becomes a problem. It essentially solidifies and contributes to the dominance of the top team. Now, I want to make a video covering this at a later date, but recently we've seen dominant teams become the exception rather than the norm. Ferrari started off the 21st decade with 5 titles in a row. We then had several years of parity before Red Bull and Sebastian Vettel dominated from 2010 to 2013. Then Mercedes came along from 2014 to 2020 with Hamilton and Rosberg winning titles. If the dominant driver scores more wins and podiums more consistently, with the current system rewarding winning more proportionally, it becomes harder for rivals to catch up over the course of a season. Let's take some extreme examples to prove my point. Say we have a 2-race schedule. That means that everyone has a chance going into the final race to win the championship. Now, say we have a 4-race schedule. A lot of the backmarkers and midfielders will probably be out, but most of the frontrunners should still be in the striking distance of the championship. Let's take a 50-race season. The odds of multiple drivers being within 25 points of each other going into the final round will be astronomically small. Obviously, both of these scenarios will never come to fruition, but I find it to be a good visualization. To put it bluntly, increasing the number of races per season lowers the probability of a championship decider at the last race. Max Verstappen clinched his title at Japan this year with 4 races left, and the championship was basically decided by the halfway mark, with Verstappen scooting away from Leclerc and Perez. And in the last 10 seasons of Formula 1 from 2013 to 2022, only 2 seasons have truly come down to the final race, 2016 and 2021. Compare that with all the close championship battles we saw in the 10 years before that, where there were 16 to 18 races. Back then, the point system was quite different and rewarded consistency a little too much, but my point still stands. With more races, the probability that we'll have multiple drivers with a chance of winning the title going into the final round will be lower, and seasons will continue to have more runaway drivers. Again, I really want to do a major deep dive into this, but that's for another video.
Which just makes a mockery of Grand Prix racing, and I'm afraid it's the current rules and all the arguments.
So, the real question is, how many races is too many? Well, the answer is subjective based on the person, but for me personally, I think a reasonable amount is somewhere between 19 and 21. Then, stick with 3, maybe 4 sprint races and call it a schedule. That way, instead of 30 races and sprints per year, we have somewhere between the region of 22 and 25, which isn't that much less, but it's noticeable enough to make a difference. However, it's clear that the direction that Formula 1 wants to head in is expanding the calendar to allow for more venues to bring in more money. I fear that our days of having close championship battles will become even more sparse than they already are. Coupled with some poor racing at some of these newer circuits and fatigue throughout the garage, it'll be interesting to watch the direction of the sport through the next few years.